Okay, so we have started the recording. Yay! And we're ready to get going here. Welcome everybody to I think the 21st or so Parlor Car Chat. This is a program of the San Luis Obispo Railroad Museum. It got started in response to the COVID stuff and the inability to actually get together to do anything. So here we are, not getting together to do something. On the screen at the moment is a slide reminding everybody, if you are not aware of it at this point, that there is an opportunity for year-end gift giving to the museum. And as you might imagine, because of the year of no activities, no events, no attendance at the museum, blah, 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 income has dropped to pretty much zero other than special projects that are still going on. So there's a special page on the website. You can find it right from the home page. It's got that picture of the year-end giving that's there in the middle of the screen. We would certainly welcome and appreciate any donation. Today's topic, I'm sure you're all aware of, is the Skunk Train's new Railbike program. And we have Gary and wife Pam, who both experienced it last year at some time. So without any further ado, let's jump on over to Gary.
Hello, yes. So I'm Gary, this is Pam, and we have ridden the Skunk Train a bunch of times and rode it last year. We did the Railbikes last year, where we actually rented the bikes and did the pedaling, and so we'll show you some pictures and all that. Before we get started, I'll give you a little history of the Skunk Train so you understand it a little better. So just to, like Jamie does with a lot of his, showing a map. Here's a map of Northern California, and you can see San Francisco down here in the south, and up here on the Northern California coast is Willits on the 101, and then Fort Bragg on the coast. And that is where the Skunk Train runs. And that railroad was created in 1885, starting out in Fort Bragg, and slowly built its way up the canyon there to bring redwood trees down from the redwood groves halfway in between Fort Bragg and Willits, down to a lumber mill, which was also formed down in Fort Bragg around the same time, the 1885 time frame.
Jim Carstensen.
And here's a list of all the stations on the Skunk Train route. It starts in milepost 0 is Fort Bragg, which is on Highway 1 right on the coast. And then North Spur is kind of the halfway point where they have created a little tourist camp, and in later years took tourists there in the middle of the, you could run from either end, from Fort Bragg or Willits to North Spur, have lunch and go back. And then Willits is down here at the bottom of the timetable, and Willits is where it meets, and you see that red line going back and forth at Willits. That's the Northwestern Pacific, and that's where for a long time they could join the National Rail Network. But two things have happened. One is the Northwestern Pacific rail line has had numerous outages between Willits and San Francisco, which has effectively cut that off. As they build the new smart commuter train service, they're rebuilding all that, and there's still hope of getting rail service to Willits eventually. And then the other problem is, and kind of what started the whole rail bike discussion or thing is basically at 3.6 miles in, very
from the coast.
From the coast. Tunnel number 1 collapsed in 2013. Then again, they got it open again. Save the Redwoods contributed a lot of money in return for an easement to protect a lot of the redwoods in this canyon, and took that money and they reopened Tunnel 1, and then in 2016 they had a bigger collapse. So at this point, there's the little segment from Fort Bragg to Tunnel 1, and then there's the segment from Willits, and it used to go all the way to North Spur and Tunnel 1, and they ran excursions, but then the Mendocino fire last year, I believe, destroyed some portions of the track, such that they now only run, I believe it's to Crawley and back on the Willits side. And then Fort Bragg, they can only run to Tunnel 1. And then, of course, Northwestern Pacific isn't yet to Willits. So it's at this point a bunch of little pieces, but they keep themselves alive. It is currently owned by the Sierra Railroad, and Sierra Railroad's primary efforts are in the Sacramento area, where they run both passenger trains, excursion trains, as well as freight operations along the wharf and up toward Woodland. So, little more history on the lumber. This is a picture of the Union Lumber Company. This is what started it all. It started out as the Redwood Lumber Company, and then quickly there were a whole bunch of lumber companies back in the 1880s, and so they all merged together and became the Union Lumber Company. And so this is where their main operation was, in Fort Bragg. And then this is a typical picture of how they were dealing with in the early days. You can see lots of trestles, which have since been replaced by fill in most places, and harvesting all the trees. And these are just a couple of fun shots of what life was like back then. So then, getting into the skunk world, in 1925, the railroad introduced, well, I think they'd had passenger service before that with some regular passenger coaches. I'm not totally sure.
And they carried the mail.
And the mail went to all the little houses along the way. And so in 1925, they started the service where they just had the little
rail bus? I don't
rail
know.
bus, yeah, that's probably the best term for it. And it was run by a gasoline engine, and it had a coal-fired stove for heat. And that's what started in 1925. This is a picture of one from the 60s. There were several generations of these. And that combination of the poorly running gas engine and the coal smell from the stove gave a pungent, unique odor. And as the little rail buses zoomed through the canyon, everybody could smell them before they saw them, was the saying. And then they started saying, "Here comes the skunk," and that was its name. And so then for decades and decades, while they would run freight for moving the logs, they would run these skunks for moving passengers, and then they would occasionally run passenger trains with coaches and locomotives for excursions and things like that. So these are several different pictures you can see that I didn't take that are online of mostly these are the 60s vintage skunks. They do have today. So one quick thing is, in 2013, when the tunnel collapsed, all the power, the locomotives, was on the Willits side. They had no power on the Fort Bragg side. at the instant it collapsed, just where was the power. And so they had a really hard time doing much, and luckily they were only closed for 6 months. But in 16, when it collapsed, this steam locomotive and a diesel locomotive were on the Fort Bragg side, and another diesel locomotive was on the Willits side. So that let them continue to run operations on both sides. So they were in much better shape to limp along after the 2016 collapse. So here's just a fun shot to give everybody a feel for things. This is the North Spur. This is the halfway point at the top where they've made it into a little tourist camp. And right now this is not used because it's cut off by the burned infrastructure on the Willits side from the Mendocino fire and the tunnel collapse on the Fort Bragg side. So this is totally isolated and not used right now. This is some of the power leaving Fort Bragg, just to give you an idea of what their power looks like. So here's the map of the, basically now I'm getting into the rail bikes. So this is pretty much a map of what the rail bike segment looks like. So this is where you leave Fort Bragg down here. What they do is you don't get on the bikes until they've gone. There's like 4 grade crossings going through Fort Bragg, and then it starts heading up the canyon as it goes by the cemetery. And so they have placed several containers, the ocean containers, at a spot along the right-of-way after the grade crossings. And that's where they store all the rail bikes. And that's where you get on. So it's right about here on the map. Then you go up a little ways, and then you join the river, which is at this point is called Pudding Creek. It's Pudding Creek, and then
this is the Noyo River, the big river.
Noyo River is down here. So Noyo River is down here on the bottom, and Pudding Creek is up here on the top, and then they join. And then so the railroad follows Pudding Creek at the beginning, leaving Fort Bragg, and then it joins Noyo River, and that's where it goes. Well, I guess the rest of the way. I don't know if Noyo River goes all the way to Willits.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Splits off at some point. So what you see on this map, then it follows Pudding Creek, and then where you see the purple is the tunnel. So there over on the right side is the tunnel, which is in purple. So the bikes that you get to ride go from Fort Bragg all the way up Pudding Creek to the purple.
And that's
3.5 miles. The tunnel is at 3.6 miles. You turn 1/10 of a mile before it. So here's a rail bike. So you can see here what the rail bikes look like. They are custom built. I don't know if it was an employee. I want to say it was an employee that built them, but I'm not totally positive if it was an employee or they got somebody else to help them with it. They've gone through several iterations. They've changed the wheels. They've changed the seats. But it's still the basic rail bike they've had for several years now. And as you can see here, there's a battery pack. Right here on the back is a battery pack. And then there's a motor that's on the axle. And it's like the motor you would get if you motorized your regular old 2-wheel bike. There are kits you can get where you put a battery and you put a little motor on the axle. It's that kind of thing. And then there's brakes that are up here, over on little arms that come up next to the seats. There's brakes, and then the pedals are down here. The pedals turn the front wheels. And So that's that. If there's any questions. So then here's us waiting. So the way the train works, oh, that's better. Moving around some stuff on my screen. So the way the scheduling works is in the summertime when they're busy. I don't know, right? I didn't check the latest schedule, so I don't know in the wintertime there's not as much train service. So it may not be as tough to schedule. But the way they schedule it is this is the train coming into Fort Bragg from up in the canyon. This is the train goes in the morning, and it's only 3.5 miles, so they go really slow, and they go up the canyon, spend a few minutes up at the tunnel, and then they push back down. So this is the tail of the train you see with the conductor riding the platform as it pushes back into town. So the rail bikes, you can see them lined up here. They've all been lined up, and this is the crowd of people that are waiting. I think there were 8 bikes. And so then as the train pushes through, then we immediately, oh, here's the train coming through. There's the conductor waving at us and their headlight on the back of the coach. And so then as the train, you can see the nose of the train going by in the distance there, then the 2 people that are helping that are the train crew people, they load the bikes onto the rails. So they quickly load all 8 bikes on the rails, and then all of us hop on, and they've got a person on the lead and a person on the tail of the line of bikes. And you can see there's the grade crossing. So you're right past the last grade crossing. And there's the container in the background where they're stored. So there's us all ready to head off.
The seats were really comfortable because they have a high back. It's not like a bicycle seat where your butt gets tired. It's like a chair. It's very comfy. But you feel kind of weird because you don't know what to do with your hands. There's no handlebars or... Okay.
So then this is us heading out. And this is the line of cars.
Bikes.
Bikes, yes. I'm so used to calling rail cars. So at the very beginning, we're going through town. I'm taking pictures here. This was the morning run. No, this was the day before run. We went and I took pictures this day, and then we rode the next day. So that's how I got these pictures. So I'm taking pictures. You can see the chain link fence here from the cemetery. The city cemetery is right behind me. And then you can see we're just now leaving Fort Bragg. This is the yard limit sign. And at times, the line of rail bikes is clumped together, but at times, as you'll see in some of the pictures, we spread out. Obviously, you're not allowed to, you're not on your own. You can't just stop because we're in a line and they've got a person on the head end and the tail end. And so they're kind of keeping us, they keep you under control, but you can spread out. There's nobody that's trying to make you go faster or whatever, except for the person behind you. You kind of feel them breathing down your neck a little bit if you go really slow for a while.
They encourage you not to use the power assist because they don't want you to run out of batteries. So riding with Gary, oh no, can't use the power assist. The wheels are rubber, right? A hard rubber?
The wheels are a hard rubber.
So going around a curve, they kind of grip instead of gliding, and you have to really pedal.
So on the straightaways, especially the downhill straightaways, it glides really smoothly. Even the uphills aren't too bad, but the curves, the one surprising thing was the turns, because it is what you call a mountain railroad. The curves are tight. I don't know the exact degrees of curvature, but it's winding through the canyon. So there's a lot of curves, and the wheels do rub. And so when we were at the turnaround point, and I was talking to the two people that were our guides were both ladies. One was a big lady, one was a little lady, and I said to her, why do they use these plastic rubbery wheels that clearly rub? Why aren't they using steel wheels? And she goes, you want to try to lift 8 of these on and off the track really quick twice a day as the train? That's the only way we could make it work. So that's the one limit. But like Pam said, it does have power assist. And one word of note for any of you that might want to go ride this thing is they tell you don't waste the battery power because you're really going to need it on the home stretch. The last mile is a gradual uphill back into Fort Bragg coming out of the river canyon. You know, it's coming down grade-wise consistently all the way from North Spur, but coming out of the canyon where the river is back up into town is an upgrade. And so they tell you the last mile is a long grade. Don't waste all your batteries or you'll have a hard time coming back home. But in reality, they stop just before that 1 mile, that last mile, and they go through and they test all the battery packs, and they have spare battery packs. And there were, out of our 8, there were 2 people that they swapped the battery pack. So don't believe them. Use the battery. Keep your significant other happy when you're. Don't hesitate when it going gets tough. Just use the batteries. And when the battery poops out, they'll give you another one.
It was easy pedaling.
So there's us. So they do, just so you know, they do give you helmets, and your feet are in little stirrup kind of pedals. Here's the control for the battery. So you can see here it's on a little stalk, kind of like a handlebar would be, and you can see the silver bar below it is the brake, and then the thing that is being pushed is a lever that you just wrap your thumb around and you push it, and that's what controls your throttle. And then over on the right side, which I did not get a picture of, is a small little display. It's about the size of a cell phone. And it shows, that's where you can read battery power and all that stuff. And it shows you how fast you're going. And typically we were going like 8, 10, 12 miles an hour when you're really going. So here's you can see the pedals. This is a clip from a video. I didn't have an exact picture of this, so there's no stirrups. Oh yeah, but this is the sprocket on the chain on the pedals, and then you can see the chain going down to the axle. And you can see here, now that you look at it, you can see that this is all what I would call home built. It's not a manufactured product. It's something that the Skunk Train built. Like I mentioned, I don't know if it was a contractor or they did it in-house. And here's a little more of a view of the frame and all that. So now you can see how far apart we get at times. There's times when you're relatively feeling, and I'll have some little video later that you can kind of see and hear. But it is very peaceful and just kind of relaxing. Cruising along, the river in this case was over on the left, and the trees are on the right, and everybody's just kind of in a relaxing, have a good couple of hours mode. And there's some of the tall trees.
Yeah, we're getting more into the canyon where the trees are.
And there's one of we have, I believe it's 2 bridges that we cross, and where Pudding Creek meanders, and the railroad tried to straighten things out, so it built some bridges across some of the creeks. That gives you an idea how big it is. That's why they call it a creek and not a river at this point. But
it's kind of fun because you can see deer and some of the birds, and other wildlife that use the river, the creek. Because you're on this bike that stays on the rail, you can look around and see everything.
Yeah, you can see, like, here's our first stop. We start. What you do is you leave, you stop halfway. The lady kind of gives you a little talk about some of the plant life and things like that. And then you go to the turnaround point, and then you do the same thing on the return. But you can see the person on the left with her cell phone and everything, but that's how people are as you're going along the whole time. Since obviously you don't need to steer, as all of you know, on the rails, you can just pedal along, and there's plenty of gaps between you, so you're not worried about hitting the next person, except when you start to slow down for something like this. So people are all out there with their cameras and their phones, taking pictures and just taking things in.
We're about to go into more of the redwood trees, more of the, almost like the redwood rainforest. And so she's giving us a little talk about some of the ferns that grow underneath and what to look for.
So that lady was telling us about some of the things to look for. And one of the things she told us to look for, which I did not get a picture of. If I knew I was giving this talk, I would have taken more pictures of things like that. But she did point out, and we did see some trees that have these holes, the way they would cut the trees. And I don't know why this tree still has it, because you'd think, oh, I guess we only saw the bottom of it, didn't we?
Uh-huh.
So you can see they cut these slots in the tree, and then they stuck boards in. And then the lumberjack, could stand on the board as he was using his axe to cut the tree. And so we did see that, and she pointed that out to us. And so I found this old picture of it just so you could understand what I was talking about.
They couldn't cut the trees at the very base, because the base of a redwood tree, the roots and the beginning of the base is where it holds all its water. And they found if they cut them too low, it had so much water in it, it wouldn't float. When they got the trees down to the lumber yard where they float them down the river, it would sink. So they had to go up higher, and that's when they would use these springboards. And there's still some of those springboards in the trees today.
So here we are cruising along, and you can just kind of get an idea for the scenery and everything. And more of that. So now we're about to play a video for you. And so this video, I'll set it up a little bit. The first 15 seconds of the video is when we rode the actual Skunk Train a couple of years ago. And then the next 60 or 70 seconds are 4 or 5 clips that Pam took of little video clips. And what I want you to really pay attention to is, as you see here, Jamie and I named this video Loud Quiet. The first 15 seconds, listen to how noisy it is with the train. You'll hear the train and the normal sounds of a train. Then listen to how peaceful and quiet it is when you're on the rail bikes. It really is a nice, peaceful ride. So if you want to roll the tape, Jamie?
Oh.
You doing okay knee-wise?
Uh-huh.
So hopefully that gave you a little bit of a feeling like you were riding it for at least a minute or so. And here's some more shots of us cruising along.
You can see the bends in the
Yep. It's got a lot,
rail line.
got a lot of curves, but you can see how grown it is and lots of foliage. So now we're at the end. So this is the end where, and there's a bridge just before the tunnel. The tunnel is what you see in the background there. I don't know why they pulled the rails up from the bridge. They explained, I want to say they pulled it up so nobody would go, but you got to make a hard stop at the bridge. What's the difference between a hard stop at the tunnel? So I don't know exactly, but there's a look into the tunnel, and you can see it's full of debris right at the get-go. It's a long tunnel. I believe it's about 1,200 feet long, and a significant amount of debris in there. And the hillside above it and the terrain around it makes it very difficult to either daylight it or go around it. So hence they applied to the Department of Transportation they've tried to get funding in numerous places. They applied to the Department of Transportation for a grant. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before. And basically the Department of Transportation said the bad news is we don't have enough money to fund your project. The good news is we believe in your project and we want you to apply again. So there's obviously good hope there. But it's still going to take some significant resources. This is owned by, like I mentioned, the Sierra Railroad, which has significant freight and passenger operations in the Sacramento area. And there's been talk that if they were to just use operating, resources that they have, it would take years. By the time they put the money into this to get it open again, it would take them years to recover that in terms of revenue on this line, because there is essentially no freight on this line anymore. It's just tourism. So the revenue is not high enough to justify repairing the tunnel at this point. So the hope is a grant mixed in with some money from the company. So this is the turnaround spot. This is where they're all lined up. It's called Glen Blair Junction. And you can see there's a little picnic table there. When we did it, you came up and you spent about 20-30 minutes here. They have, and just as a side note, when we did it, it was $80 for the two of us. Since then, the Sierra Railroad they've built more rail bikes, and they're running them on the Sacramento River over in Sacramento as well. And they, at a corporate level, decided to start charging $250. So right now, to do this, it's $250. So it's a little pricey. When we did it at $80, it was a bargain. But to try to justify the $250 charge, they have juggled their schedule such that you now get to spend about an hour here. They have created some trails around this site and some additional picnic tables, I was told. And so you can make it now, instead of it just being a turnaround spot, it's now kind of a 1-hour picnic spot. So this is the line of cars. You can see, it's hard to see, that all of these cars, I keep calling them cars, all of these rail bikes are pointing back toward home, except the very last one. You can see a person there in the shadows. She's in the process of turning the last car. There is last bike. There is a turntable. They've installed a turntable here. And so they roll it over the turntable, kind of like a turntable like you'd use for speeders. And except instead of it being on the speeder or the bike, it's built into the ground and comes up and pushes up the bike. There's a close-up of the bike. If anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to type them into chat, or we can talk about it at the end. But there's the bike with the handles to hold on and the brakes and the power assist and then the pedals. And you can see the frame and these composite plastic rubber wheels. We're right at, you can see the switch stand here in the background. We're just before that bridge that was taken out. And there's a siding just before that bridge and tunnel. They built a siding. I'm guessing that was logistically there for, years ago, doing work on the tunnels and stuff. You could park maintenance away equipment on that siding. So that's where we're at, is just before that bridge that they've pulled the rails up from. So here's the line of rail bikes ready to head back. And here's us starting back. And so now we've just gotten to town, and we got to town. I checked the timestamps on my photos. We got to town at like 2:52, and the two ladies started hustling to get the bikes off because here we are, the train's coming back now. And this is the afternoon excursion of the train, and it's 3:09. So this train is coming through, 17 minutes after we got back. He's already coming through. And so that's the end of the actual rail bikes. So now, afterwards, we went over to the old shop area, which is probably a quarter mile from where the rail bikes, where I just took that last picture sitting on the rail bikes. Go through the 4 grade crossings, and I'll have an aerial shot that'll kind of show you where this is. So you can see the Skunk Railroad has seen better days, of course. Its heyday is over. Obviously, there's hope that its heyday will come back. More tourism. If they finally do get the tunnel fixed, get the tracks that burned in the Mendocino fire repaired, and smart commuter service eventually gets to Willits, then this railroad will be back on the National Rail Network and could start moving freight. Heaven only knows, I think there's still some life left in it, but you can see this is tired. So this is the entrance to the building, and the yard is on the right, and the shops are on the left. And
it's a great looking old building, though.
Yes, makes for great photography for historical buildings. So when I was there, I had my Railroad Museum jacket on and was talking to them, and they heard that I was from the Railroad Museum and said, well, don't tell anybody, but come on in, let's look around. So they took me inside, and I got to see the inside of their shops, and you can see one of the pictures here. And so it's still a working shops. It looks old and tired, but it's still working. And then next to the shops is a model of the actual Skunk Railroad. And so there's an active group of people that are still working the model. And so they've done some, as you can see, some real detail work on the model. So here's the aerial shot. So back here, I don't know if you can see my cursor moving back here behind the long white building.
The upper left.
The upper left is the tracks coming in from the left, about a quarter of the way down is where the tracks are coming in, and that's the offices building, and then the shop building, and then the model, and this is the rail yard. What you see in front of it is just a part of the old lumber mill. The lumber mill is now all gone. The lumber mill closed in 2002. It was the Fort Bragg Redwood Company, which then became the Union Lumber Company, like I mentioned, in 1891. Then Boise Cascade bought it in 1969. And then that became Georgia Pacific in 1973. And then in 2002, Georgia Pacific gave up on the lumber mill and closed it. And they more or less took all the buildings away, but didn't really decontaminate the soil. And then for years they tried to sell it, but nobody bought it because you're buying all this contaminated soil. So finally they realized they had to do decontamination, and so they did the standard work with everybody they could find, and lots of money, I'm sure, flowed, and they essentially decontaminated the soil. And so this is a big shot of a big part of it. You can see how empty it is, but it's beautiful property all along the coast here. So then in 2017, Fort Bragg bought part of it and turned parts of it into a park. And then just last year, the railroad bought 77 acres. And they bought it, and the words were, for redevelopment and extending service to a new terminal. But I couldn't find any more information about what that really means. But the railroad clearly has plans. They've at least invested in buying 77 acres. So slowly but surely, this mill will come back as something for the town of Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg depends now primarily on tourism. So one of the things you can do, if you see the grade crossing here on the right side, this is right, you see the ocean in the background. So this is right next to the railroad offices. So you can easily take a walk when you get off the train over to North Coast Brewing, which is the premier brewing company in that area.
Really good beer, really good food. After riding the rail bikes, you need something to drink. Fort Bragg is a really cute little town. I hope to see it grow a little bit or keep its tourism. Some of the best ice cream ever. They even have a mushroom. It's called Candy Cap mushroom ice cream that is so good at Cowlicks here.
As you can see, we like Fort Bragg, not just because of the railroad. Obviously, every time we go, I go and watch the train, visit the train. But our whole family, my kids, everybody, we like going there. And it's a fun place. One of the other things that's there is a botanical gardens that's huge. And it goes all the way from Highway 1 to the coast. And I don't the last part of our talk here is one of the things Fort Bragg is famous for is what's called Glass Beach. And Glass Beach was obviously on the beach, on the coast. And what it started out as in the 1880s is the town dump. Basically, that was back in the days of the ocean will take everything away. it just magically disappears. So there's kind of it's a cliff. It's not a heavy cliff. It's probably a 20-foot cliff.
Near the Georgia Pacific.
Yes, it's near the lumber mill, paper mill, and so everybody just dumped all their trash over in this one area.
Until like 1964.
So it was a long time that they did that. And so all the paper products just washed out to sea, right, and disappeared. But the glass more or less stayed. And so then the waves continue to pummel the glass and break it up into smaller and smaller pieces and round it. Yes. And so you can see how massive it is. It's acres of glass. And for the longest time it was, I think it was privately owned or it was city owned. Either way, it was officially off limits, but nobody policed it. So lots of people would go down there and look for pieces of glass once they stopped doing it in the 60s. And then there's my daughter standing in the glass. And so then I don't know the exact
became a state park.
Somewhere around 10 years ago, the state, as they've been trying to redevelop all this after Georgia Pacific left in 2002, they've been redeveloping or trying to redevelop. And the city put in a park, and the state parks took over part of it. And so the state park took over the whole part that's Glass Beach, and have now made it into Glass Beach State Park. And so now officially, it went from kind of officially you're not supposed to take glass, but nobody polices it, to now it's policed and it's managed, and the hope is to preserve it for the future. Whereas people used to be taking out, even when we would go there, take out buckets and buckets of glass, whereas now people can't because it's a state park. So people still take out pocketsfuls of glass, but they don't take out bucketfuls of glass anymore.
If you can hike to the south end, like off the bluffs of the Georgia Pacific, it's hard to get there. You have to kind of go down a cliff. But if you can go there, it's not state park, and there's more glass, because a lot of this has been picked over already.
Yeah, there's certain colors that the glass aficionados love, the reds and the blues, and then the clear, the green, and the brown, especially the brown, they don't care about at all. So you can see here there's very little reds and blues, because that's the stuff that's really sought after. So that's the end of the talk. And so now what I have here is about 5 minutes of 2 promotional videos. One was done by the Skunk Train people. They hired a company, what's the exact, California Through My Lens or something like that. And they do a little promotional piece, which I think is a good overview of the Skunk Railbikes. And then ABC News did a piece on the Railbikes. So those 2 videos will play now for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back for any last-minute questions. So if you want to start that video, Jamie.
What's up, guys? Josh and Amy from CaliforniaThroughMyLens.com, and today we're doing something really unique. We're going to go on some rail bikes.
Located in the town of Fort Bragg on the same track that they used for the famous Skunk Train, the Railbikes are a new activity they launched just 4 weeks ago.
We're all checked in, got our tickets, now we're heading over to where the rail bikes start.
We arrived 45 minutes early and got a tour of how to use the bikes. Then after the Skunk Train went past, we loaded the bikes on the rails and set out. We're on the Railbikes.
Woohoo!
This is a 1-hour tour and we're going to the redwoods right now. The bikes fit 2 people, 1 passenger and 1 driver, and it's a relaxing tour that really lets you enjoy the scenery.
This is how it works. I'm pedaling. Amy's not pedaling. Oh, she's pedaling for the video. I caught her.
I'm the driver.
Yeah.
I don't need to pedal.
So you don't actually have to pedal at all. You just have to press this button. And that's all it takes to get going.
Redwoods. We made it to the halfway point. We're going to get out and do some exploring before we head on back. You can see why this is the turnaround point. There's no track left.
This part of the track was closed when a tunnel collapsed a few years ago, but there are hopes to open it again in the future.
I hope you enjoy the hike back. For exploring these rail bikes with us. Make sure to like and subscribe and check out CaliforniaThroughMyLens.com for more.
Hiding below a towering redwood forest on the Mendocino coastline is a bike ride like no other.
Well, we've had a lot of rain, so this looks almost like a postcard for Ireland out here.
This is the historic Western Railroad track in Fort Bragg. And this is a rail bike.
So they're mostly off-the-shelf parts. The wheels are obviously very specialized.
Our cycle conductor on this ride is Rick Hinman.
I believe the actual position would be rail bike guide.
The pedal-powered locomotive rides on what's known as the historic Skunk Train track.
It's a former logging train. It began passenger operation in the early 1900s.
It's called the Skunk Train because of the stinky exhaust that comes out of the locomotive. But you won't find any pollution on the rail bikes.
Good news is if you have kind of a lazy passenger, you got this thing, a nice little electric-powered throttle.
All the rail bikes are electric-powered, allowing you to silently cruise through the redwood forest and take in the scenery.
Really electric green, and you can see all these horsetail ferns growing on the side. And
below this canopy of green is the Noyo River estuary, a pristine redwood forest that survived centuries of destruction brought on by man.
So, what are we in right now?
All right, these are known as goose pens, and they're actually where a redwood tree, which has fire-retardant bark but very flammable interior wood, the bark had gotten damaged, and a fire came along and actually hollowed the tree out.
The ride continues over 2 different trestle bridges and eventually leads you to Glen Blair Junction, where the track ends abruptly at this tunnel.
And this railroad was finished in 1911. It ran 40 miles, and this train line ended in Willits. And what's behind me is tunnel number 1, which was taken out, as you can sort of see, by a huge landslide.
The rail bike ride is just a 7-mile round trip, and thankfully Rick turns those rail bikes around for you. So that way on the way back, you have a second chance to take a picture if you missed anything.
You know, the good thing about this is you can text and drive on this. No steering wheel.
From the lush green coastlines of Fort Bragg and Mendocino County, I'm John Bartell. Hope to see you on the back roads.
Hey, thanks for watching, and check out more videos just like this. Also, let me know in the comments what you want me to check out next.
So that's it. If anybody's got any questions, Jamie will unmute everybody. And
I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun.
yeah, even for $250, worthwhile trip.
I think everybody's open if anybody has any questions.
What one day you hear one thing, the next day it's like the shot. Do I want the shot? I don't know if I want to be the first. I'm trying to.
Let's see. I'm not hearing any questions. I don't think.
No
questions. I don't think. Let's see. All right. Right. Well, let's wrap this up then. This last slide will do a number of things. Remind you that there's the donation ability at the Railroad Museum. This upper right-hand corner, parlorcarchats.html address. That's where you can find out all about future presentations, as well as find videos from previous presentations, including this one, of course, which will be there sometime today. There's a place for some feedback you can do if you have ideas for future chats, that sort of thing. And then coming up, our next Parlor Car Chat will be on January 9th, same time, 10 a.m. Pacific. And it will be a presentation by Charlie Crabb on the Swanton Pacific Railroad.
Hey, James.
Gary, do you see the question about the hotel at Fort Bragg, if you have a recommendation, and what happens if it rains?
Yes, both questions. We've stayed at the Holiday Inn Express. So the Super 8 Motel is a good place for lower budget, and the Holiday Inn Express is just a nice, more modern hotel, motel-ish place. Both of those I highly recommend.
Those are the two we've stayed in. There's several others that I hear good things about. There's some right on the coast, some more into town.
Hey, Gary?
Yeah.
I had to cut you off because we were getting too much noise in the background. So you were out for about 20 seconds right before you summarized and named the two places. Okay. So if there was anything said before that was important, you might want to repeat it.
Okay, I'll summarize the hotels. So the two main hotels that we've stayed at numerous times is the Super 8 Motel. Believe it or not, I know it sounds low budget, but it's a nice, clean, centrally located. If you just need a bed and a nice place to stay, the Super 8 Motel, you won't go wrong. It's right on Highway 1. And then if you want a little higher-end place with breakfast and all of that, it's the Holiday Inn Express, a little more south. And we've stayed there several times. And so both of those I would highly recommend. But like Pam mentioned, there's lots of hotels there. And you get a wide variety from, you can go down a little more south into the Mendocino area and be in all sorts of hoity-toity, nice view hotels or, bed and breakfast. And the
Little River Inn is beautiful.
Oh, yes.
And has a great dinner, too.
Yeah, we've eaten there several times.
Okay.
The rain.
Rain. Yeah. And before you answer the rain, though, let me mention, I'm not going to open the microphones back up again. That was a disaster. So if you have any other questions, write them in on the chat while Gary talks about the rain issue.
So I've heard, but obviously when we did it, it was summertime and relatively dry and everything was fine. But I've heard that the rail bikes go on rain or shine, and if you get wet, you get wet. And
I think they have little ponchos like Disneyland.
Yes. So it's when I was looking for some videos to kind of play to give some color commentary like we saw at the end, I did see one where people came back like drowned rats. I think you go no matter what. I'm sure you could get a refund or get another day and change in your tickets if you bought tickets one day, because that's a good point also, is you do make reservations. I don't think you have to make them very far in advance. I think we went the day before and said I want to buy tickets for tomorrow. But I think it's busy enough that you do need to make reservations if you want to be sure you get a seat. And so if it turned out to then start raining by the time your actual trip came, I'm sure you could delay it. But you're in the trees and everything. You probably you're not out in the open that much. So I'm sure you'd have a great time, even in the rain.
All right. Hey, thanks a million, you two, for doing this rail bike talk. That was great.
We had fun. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And I hope some other people get a chance to check it out now, too.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We will
who does go.
See you on the 9th. Say it again, Gary.
Well, I was just going to say, if anybody does go on the rail bikes, share your pictures with us.
Hey, there you go.
Let us know what you think and share the pictures.
Excellent. All right, everybody have a great day. We will see.
I do have one more thing. Like you always do, I do have a list of links that we will post about where a lot of this information came from. So if you want to know some of the backstories, the links will be on the video and on the Parlor Car Chat page and on the YouTube video down below the video section.
Excellent. Very good. Thanks again, Gary and Pam, and we'll see you on the 9th for Swanton Pacific Railroad.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.